My mom went to Europe for a month and left me with $20 when I was 11. When they finally came back, what my mom saw made her gasp. No. No. This can't be happening. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. It happened in the marble hallway of our isolated Connecticut estate. My mother, Angela, didn't hug me goodbye. She simply handed me a crisp $20 bill and a sleek black credit card. She called it the ultimate maturity test. She framed it as a privilege, not an abandonment. Then she and my father walked out the door for a $30,000 luxury tour. The heavy oak door clicked shut, sealing me inside. The smart home system hummed to life, locking the perimeter. Instantly, the sanctuary became a high-tech prison, and the silence was absolute. The first hunger pang hit me around 6 o'clock that evening. It wasn't a growl, it was a sharp twist. A reminder that my body was still on a child's schedule, even if my parents expected me to live like a ghost. I pulled out my phone and opened the delivery app. My mother had made a show of handing me that sleek black card, tapping it against my palm like she was bestowing a knighthood. Emergency use only, she'd said. I added a pizza to the cart. Just cheese. Nothing expensive. I pressed order. Declined. I stared at the screen. I tried again. Transaction failed. Please contact your bank. I tried a grocery app. Bread. Milk. Peanut butter. Declined. I tried a rideshare app, thinking maybe I could just go to the store myself. Card inactive. It wasn't an error. It was a prop. She had given me a piece of plastic to make herself feel better about walking out the door. But she hadn't bothered to activate it. I stood there in the foyer, the marble floor cold against my socks, holding a useless rectangle that was supposed to be my lifeline. I walked into the kitchen. It was a chef's kitchen, the kind you see in magazines, gleaming stainless steel, an island big enough to land a plane on, and a sub-zero fridge that cost more than most cars. I pulled the heavy handle. The light flared on, illuminating shelves of pristine, terrifying emptiness. There was a jar of artisan truffle mustard, 3 bottles of imported sparkling water, a lemon that looked like it had been there since Christmas, and in the pantry, tucked behind a display of decorative olive oils, I found 1 box of dry pasta. No sauce. No butter. Just rigid, yellow elbows. I looked out the window. Our driveway is a 1/4 mile long, winding through a dense forest of oak and maple. The nearest neighbor, Mrs. Catherine, lives on the next estate over, behind a 10-foot hedge. If I screamed, the only thing that would hear me was the security system. A normal kid would have panicked. A normal kid would have run to the neighbors or called the police. But I wasn't a normal kid. I was Angela's daughter. You see, in my house, suffering wasn't an emergency. It was a curriculum. My mother had spent 11 years teaching me that my needs were an inconvenience. When I fell and scraped my knee at 6, she told me tears were manipulative. When I had the flu at 9, she told me to stop seeking attention and sleep it off. She had normalized the cruelty so thoroughly that I didn't see a starving child in the reflection of the stainless steel oven. I saw a candidate taking a test. If I called for help, I would be proving her right. I would be the needy child she always sighed about to her friends. I would be failing the maturity test. This wasn't abandonment in my mind. It was an obstacle course. If I could survive this, if I could make that 1 box of pasta last for a month, maybe then she would finally look at me with pride instead of exhaustion. I filled a pot with water. I didn't turn on the lights because I wanted to save electricity, to show them how responsible I could be. I counted out 20 pasta shells. That was dinner. I ate them plain, standing over the sink, letting the hot water warm my hands while the house hummed around me. Vast and indifferent. I told myself I wasn't hungry. I told myself this was what discipline tasted like. By day 4, the hunger wasn't a sharp pain anymore. It was a heavy, gray fog that settled over my brain, making the edges of the room blur when I stood up too fast. I spent most of the time sitting on the kitchen floor, my back against the dishwasher, holding my phone like it was a grenade waiting to go off. I opened Instagram. I shouldn't have, but I needed to know if they were even thinking about me. And there it was. Angela's latest post, uploaded 2 hours ago, from Le Muris, in Paris. It was a carousel of photos. The first was a selfie of her and Thomas, clinking crystal flutes of champagne, their skin glowing with that expensive vacation sheen. The caption read, "Finally unplugged. Reconnecting with my soulmate in the city of light. Hashtag freedom. Hashtag no distractions." I swiped. A plate of seared scallops. A tower of macarons. A steak covered in gold leaf. I looked down at my lap. I was holding a bowl with exactly 12 boiled pasta shells. No salt. No oil. Just wet, tasteless starch. The contrast wasn't just unfair, it was violent. They were eating gold while I was rationing carbohydrates to keep from passing out. But the real blow wasn't the food. It was the silence. I checked my call log for the 100th time. 0 missed calls. 0 text messages. For 4 days. I had been waiting for the phone to ring. I had convinced myself that the maturity test included a daily check-in. A pop quiz, where I'd have to report that the house was clean, and I was fine. But there was nothing. They hadn't called to ask if I'd figured out the alarm system. They hadn't called to say goodnight. They hadn't even called to make sure the house hadn't burned down. That's when the gaslighting finally cracked. My mother hadn't left me here to teach me independence. She hadn't left me here to help me grow. She left me here because I was an anchor she wanted to cut loose. All those speeches about me being needy or dramatic were just projection. She wasn't teaching me a lesson. She was taking a vacation from being a mother. Something inside me snapped. It was quiet. Like a dry twig, stepping on a forest floor. But it changed everything. I stopped being the daughter trying to pass a test. I became something else entirely. I looked up at the corner of the kitchen ceiling. The small, red LED of the 360-degree security camera blinked at me. The house was rigged with 18 of them. Thomas loved his gadgets. He wanted to monitor the cleaning staff, the gardeners, the perimeter. He wanted total control. I stood up. My knees shook. But my mind was crystal clear. If they wanted a smart home, I would give them a genius one. I dragged a chair to the center of the room. Directly under the lens. I didn't hide the empty pasta box. I didn't brush my hair. I looked straight into the black glass eye. Day 5. I said, my voice raspy from dehydration. I'm still here. The credit card doesn't work. The food is gone. You haven't called. I waited a beat, letting the silence record itself. If you're watching this later, I continued, it means someone asked you where I was. I climbed down and walked to the library. The main server for the home automation system was housed in a glass cabinet behind Thomas's desk. I knew the admin password because Thomas was a narcissist. It was his own birthday. I logged in. I navigated to the communication logs. I didn't just want to know they hadn't called. I wanted proof. I exported the data. Outgoing calls to Haley's mobile 0. Incoming calls from parents 0. I saved the file to a hidden folder. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building a case file. I was the digital witness to my own erasure. The silence I had curated was shattered on day 7. It wasn't a knock. It was the gate intercom. A shrill, electronic blast that echoed through the marble foyer like a gunshot. I froze in the library, my hand hovering over the server keyboard, my heart hammered against my ribs. Not with relief, but with terror. I crept to the security monitor mounted on the wall. On the grainy blue screen, a silver sedan sat idling at the front gate. A man was standing by the keypad, pressing the call button repeatedly. I recognized the tweed jacket immediately. Mr. Jacob, the school counselor. He shouldn't have been there. It was summer break. But Mr. Jacob was the kind of man who noticed when emails went unanswered and when perfect families went silent. My finger hovered over the unlock button. This was it. The moment of truth. And I hesitated. You might wonder why a starving child would hesitate to let in a savior. You might think I should have been running down the driveway, screaming for help. But that's because you don't understand the invisible chain of the survivor. My mother had spent years forging that chain. Link by heavy link. It was made of whispered warnings and heavy sighs. What happens in this house, stays in this house. Haley, don't air our dirty laundry. Nobody likes a tattletale. She had conditioned me to believe that protecting the family image was more important than my own survival. Opening that gate felt like treason. It felt like I was the one pulling the trigger on my family. It was a prison without bars, built entirely of loyalty to people who had none for me. The intercom buzzed again. Haley, it's Mr. Jacob. I know you're in there. If you don't open the gate, I'm calling the police to break it down. The police. That word cut through the fog of my conditioning. If the police came, they would break the door. There would be sirens. There would be noise. Angela hated noise. But then my stomach cramped. A violent, twisting spasm that doubled me over. The pain was absolute clarity. My loyalty died right there on the Persian rug. I reached up. My hand was trembling so hard I missed the button twice. On the third try, I pressed it. Click. The heavy iron gates swung open. I unlocked the front door and sat on the bottom step of the grand staircase. Too weak to stand. When Mr. Jacob walked in, the look on his face wasn't anger. It was horror. He took in the shadows, the silence, and me, pale, shivering, and smaller than he remembered. He didn't ask where my parents were. He knew. He looked at the empty counter where a fruit bowl should have been. He looked at the unplugged decorative lamps. Okay, he said, his voice dangerously level. Okay. He pulled out his phone. He didn't call 911. He called the number for the estate next door. Catherine, it's Jacob. I'm at the Carter place. Bring the car around. Now. 5 minutes later. Mrs. Catherine walked through the open door. She was a widow. Wealthy in the way that whispers rather than screams. And she had lived next door for 6 years. I had never spoken to her. My mother called her nosy. Mrs. Catherine took one look at me and didn't say a word. She simply took off her cashmere cardigan and wrapped it around my shoulders. It smelled like lavender and real detergent. Not the chemical scent of our cleaning service. Come on. Honey, she said. Let's go. Walking out of my house felt like walking off the edge of the world. The air outside was warm, thick with the scent of pine and cut grass. I realized I hadn't stepped outside in a week. As I climbed into Mrs. Catherine's car, I looked back at the house. It loomed there. Dark and beautiful and empty. It wasn't a home. It was just a building where I had almost faded away. We drove 200 yards to Mrs. Catherine's driveway. Her kitchen was everything mine wasn't. It was messy. There were papers on the island. A half-drunk mug of tea. And a pot simmering on the stove. It was warm. It was alive. She sat me down and placed a bowl of vegetable soup in front of me. "Eat slow," she murmured. I took the first bite. The warmth hit my stomach and I almost gagged. My body confused by the sudden presence of nutrition. But then I took another. And another. Mr. Jacob sat across from me. A notepad open. "We need to call Child Protective Services. Haley. We need to document this." I put down the spoon. The food had given me just enough energy to remember the hidden folder on the server. "Not yet," I whispered. Mr. Jacob paused. "Why?" "Because they're going to lie," I said. "They're going to say they hired a nanny. They're going to say it was a mistake." Mr. Jacob looked at Mrs. Catherine. "They might. I can prove they didn't," I said. "I need a computer." Mrs. Catherine's home office was a stark contrast to my father's library, where his desk was a pristine slab of mahogany meant to intimidate. Hers was cluttered with gardening journals and open letters. I sat at her computer. Mr. Jacob standing behind me. While Mrs. Catherine called the non-emergency police line. The authorities moved with a speed that surprised me. Within 2 hours, a CPS caseworker named Ms. Ramirez and a uniformed officer were sitting in Mrs. Catherine's living room. They listened to Mr. Jacob. They looked at the photos of my empty fridge. They took my statement. Then came the call. It was my mother. The house security system must have alerted her that the front door had been opened. I stared at my phone screen, watching her name flash. "Answer it." "Ms. Ramirez said gently. "Put it on speaker. We need to hear what she says." I pressed the green button. "Hello." Haley Angela's voice was sharp. Annoyed. "Why is the front door open? I got an alert." "Are you playing outside?" "No." I said. "Mr. Jacob is here." There was a pause. "Who?" "The school counselor. He came to check on me." "Why would he do that?" Her tone shifted instantly from annoyance to defensive panic. "Is everything okay? Where is the nanny?" There it was. The lie. The alibi. I looked at Ms. Ramirez. She nodded for me to continue. "What nanny?" I asked. "Don't play dumb." "Haley," Angela snapped. "The agency sent someone over. She's supposed to be staying in the guest suite." "Is she not there? Oh my God. Did she leave you alone?" It was a brilliant performance. In 2 sentences, she had shifted the blame from herself to a phantom employee. She was the victim of a negligent agency. She was the worried mother. "Thomas," I heard her yell in the background. "Call the agency. The nanny isn't there. Haley is alone." It was so convincing that for a second, I almost believed her. I almost thought, maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they did try. But then I remembered the library. I remembered the conversation I had overheard the night before they left. They were drinking wine in the kitchen, laughing about the cost of first-class tickets. "Haley," Angela said, her voice softening into fake concern. "Honey, listen to me. We are coming home right now. We had no idea. We thought you were safe. That nanny. I am going to sue that agency into the ground." "Okay?" I said. "Okay?" "Mom." I hung up. The room was silent. That complicates things. The police officer said, frowning, "If they hired someone, and that person abandoned you, this is a case of breach of contract." Not parental neglect. They didn't hire anyone. I said. Do you know that for sure, Ms. Ramirez asked. I can prove it. I turned back to the computer. I had already logged into the cloud server. I navigated to the audio archives. The kitchen security system had a glass break sensor that also recorded high-decibel conversations. My parents were loud when they drank. I scrolled back 2 weeks. June 14th. 9:45 p.m. I clicked play. The audio was crisp. Angela's voice. $5,000 for a sitter for a month. That's robbery. Thomas's voice. We can just give her the emergency card. She's 11. She needs to learn to fend for herself. Besides, think of the upgrade. We can do the suite at La Muris if we don't blow the budget on a babysitter. Angela, you're right. It's time she grew up. We'll tell people we hired someone if anyone asks. But honestly, she'll be fine. It's a maturity test. The recording ended. The silence in Mrs. Catherine's living room was heavier than the silence in my empty house. The officer looked at Ms. Ramirez. That's intent, he said. That's conspiracy to commit neglect. Ms. Ramirez looked at me. Her eyes were sad, but her voice was firm. Can you download that file? Haley already did, I said. And I sent a copy to my school email. I wasn't just a child anymore. I was the prosecutor. And the trial was about to begin. The authorities didn't arrest my parents immediately. Ms. Ramirez explained that for a case this solid, they wanted to catch them in the act. They wanted the confrontation. So we set the stage. We went back to my house. The police officer parked his cruiser in the garage. Out of sight. Ms. Ramirez. Mr. Jacob. Mrs. Catherine. And I sat in the living room. We turned off the lights, except for one lamp in the corner. The house was silent again. But this time, it was a loaded silence. It was a trap. I placed Mrs. Catherine's iPad on the marble coffee table. It was connected via Bluetooth to the whole house audio system. The audio file was queued up. We waited. At 7:30 in the evening, the heavy iron gates swung open. I watched on the security monitor as the black SUV rolled up the driveway. My parents got out. They looked tanned, relaxed, and burdened with shopping bags. Angela was wearing a new silk scarf. Thomas was laughing at something on his phone. They had no idea. They thought they were walking into a quiet house where their daughter had learned a valuable lesson about gratitude. They thought they were the victors. The front door opened. Haley, Angela called out. Her voice bright and artificial. We're home, did you miss us? She stepped into the living room and froze. The smile dropped from her face like a mask falling to the floor. Thomas bumped into her from behind. What's going on? Who are? He stopped. Seeing the uniforms. What is this? Angela demanded. Her voice rising. Who are you people? Where is the nanny? She was still doing it. She was still performing. I stood up. My legs felt solid for the first time in weeks. I didn't say a word. I just tapped the screen of the iPad. The audio boomed through the hidden speakers. Crystal clear and undeniable. $5,000 for a sitter for a month. That's robbery. Thomas. Angela flinched, as if she'd been struck. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for the source of her own voice. We can just give her the emergency card. She's 11. She needs to learn to fend for herself. Thomas went pale. He dropped the shopping bags. A bottle of duty-free scotch shattered on the floor. The smell of alcohol mixing with the tension. You're right. It's time she grew up. We'll tell people we hired someone, if anyone asks. But honestly, she'll be fine. It's a maturity test. The recording ended. The echo hung in the air. Heavy and damning. Angela looked at me. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. Not anger. Not disappointment. Fear. She realized the script had flipped. She wasn't the director anymore. No. She whispered, shaking her head. No. This can't be happening. It already did. I said. My voice was calm. Steady. I passed the test. Mom. I grew up. Ms. Ramirez stood. Mr. and Mrs. Carter. You are under arrest for child endangerment and conspiracy to commit neglect. As the officer moved forward with the handcuffs, Angela didn't look at him. She looked at me. Haley. Please. We just wanted you to be independent. I am. I said. Independently safe from you. They were led out the front door. Past the marble columns and the perfectly manicured lawn. I watched them go. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I just felt light. The weight of their expectations. Their gaslighting. Their conditional love, it was all gone. The fallout was swift. Brutal. And entirely public. In their world. Reputation was currency. And I had just bankrupted them. The news of the arrest shattered their social standing before they even made bail. The perfect family facade didn't just crack, it pulverized. The country club memberships were revoked. The charity boards asked for resignations. The estate. That cold, marble monument to their vanity, was put on the market to cover legal fees. They lost custody. Of course. The recording I found on the server made sure of that. It was the nail in the coffin of their defense. They couldn't claim it was a mistake. They couldn't claim it was a misunderstanding. It was a calculation. And they had miscalculated me. 6 months later, I am kneeling in the dirt in Mrs. Catherine's backyard. My hands are covered in soil. Real. Dark. Messy earth. Angela would have hated this. She hated dirt. She hated anything that couldn't be sanitized or controlled. But I love it. I am planting tomatoes. Mrs. Catherine is on the porch. Reading. Glancing up every few minutes just to see me. Not to check if I'm behaving. Not to monitor me. Just to see me. There is a concept I read about called the justice of the sower. It says that true justice isn't just about cutting down the weeds, it's about planting something new in the cleared ground. For a long time, I thought my victory was seeing my parents in handcuffs. I thought it was the destruction of their lies. But as I pat the soil around the green sapling, I realized that was just the demolition. This, the dirt under my fingernails, the sun on my back, the safety of a home where the fridge is always full. This is the reconstruction. I didn't destroy my parents. I simply stopped carrying the weight of their secrets. I put the burden down. And the crash was their own doing. I look back at the house next door. It's sold now. A new family is moving in. I saw a swing set in the moving truck. It looks like a home again. Not a museum. My phone buzzes. It's a text from Mr. Jacob. Checking in on my school project. I reply instantly. I don't have to hide anymore. I don't have to pretend I'm independent. I am dependent on people who care about me. And for the first time, that doesn't feel like a weakness. It feels like a root system. I passed the maturity test. Mom. But not the one you designed. I learned that the most mature thing you can do is refuse to participate in your own destruction. I learned that silence isn't strength. And I learned that I deserve to be fed. To be held. And to be seen. I wipe the dirt from my hands and stand up. I am not the ghost in the hallway anymore. I am the girl in the garden. And I am growing. If you've ever had to break a rule to save yourself, I want to hear your story. Share this video if you believe children deserve to be seen, not just stored.